Hello there. How are you all? So let's talk about the remaining portion of the first chapter, the last lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Almost half of the portion of the story has already been taken up there in the first part. Before moving up to the second portion, let's talk about what we have discussed already there in the first uh, part of the video. We talked about France's reluctance to go to school, and we know why, because he was unprepared. He was not ready with the rules of the participle, which he was supposed to, as that was the part of the homework given to him by his teacher, Monsieur Hamel. And even he thought of spending the day outdoors, as there were you know couple of temptations. The day being warm and bright, birds chopping at the edge of the woods, Prussian soldiers uh, drilling at the back of the sawmill. All these things were more tempting than the rules for participles. But he somehow resisted his temptations. And despite being very late to school, despite being not being ready with the rules for the participles, he hurried off to school. Then we talked about the bulletin board. People were standing in front of the bulletin board. A large crowd was there in front of the bulletin board, and he just wondered what could be the matter now, because bulletin board had been an important place for the people of Alsace, because all the bad news had come to them through the bulletin board. The bad news like the lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer had come to them through the bulletin board, which was situated there in the town hall. Uh, One person, Mr. Vactor, was standing in at the bulletin board, and he very ironically told Franz that he didn't go to school so fast, as he had plenty of time to reach there. So he Franz wondered that he was he thought to himself that he was being ridiculed by Mr. Vactor the blacksmith, because he was already very late to school. But somehow he reached the school. Then we talked about uh, the usual scenes when the school started, and I believe that you pretty well remember them. What were the usual scenes? The school, there was great bustle when the school started, and that noise could be heard out there in the street, opening and closing of the desks, uh, lesson being repeated in unison, with their hands on the ears to understand better. Teacher's ruler hitting on the table, and all these noises, this commotion was going on when the school started. And he had depended on this commotion only to get into the class without being noticed by the teacher, because he was very late to school. He was scared and he was embarrassed. He was even blushed to enter the class, because he thought he would be punished for being late to school. But neither he was punished, nor was he asked the reason behind being late to school. He simply was asked to go to his place by the teacher. So when he got over with his fright, he looked at his teacher, and one more surprise was waiting for him. And what was that? The teacher was clad in different special uniform: green coat, frilled shirt, black silk cap with embroidery. And the most surprising thing was behind his back. At the back of the classroom, on the benches which were always empty, old people of the village were sitting. And that was the most surprising thing. Old Hauser, former mayor, postmaster, and many other people, old people, were sitting over there. So he just was wondering, why all these changes are there in the town, uh, in the school, teacher in special uniform. Neither it was uh, inspection day nor was it prize day. So what's happening? And then an announcement was made, and that announcement gave the shock of his life to him. He was stunned to hear that that was the last French lesson. Their own language, their mother tongue, had been snatched away from them. He felt as if he was struck by a lightning. Those words were like bolt from the blue. That was so shocking to hear his teacher saying that that was the last French lesson. German would be taught from the next day. So he underwent, of course, he was at that time, a lot of, stirring was taking place inside his mind. He underwent so many changes. A complete transformation took place after that. He didn't like to study. He didn't pay attention to his language. But all of a sudden, he begets deep-seated love for his mother tongue. He is so, regretful for not learning his lessons. So let us see in the next portion, the part 2, what happens. So transformation we have already talked about. He was very sorry that he's full of regrets. He is regretting that he wasted his time, precious time, in seeking the bird's eggs and going sliding on the Sar. The Sar is a coal mine area where he would go for sliding instead of attending his lessons, learning his language. He would look for the bird's eggs and all these things. He all these futile things he did instead of doing his studies, learning his language, attending to his classes. And the books, they were such a nuisance for him. They were heavy to carry. And those books which were a nuisance, heavy to carry, they suddenly became his old friends. The books on grammar, the books on history of saints, they all became his old friends, which he never wanted to be separated from. And he forgot about his teacher's terrible iron ruler and how cranky, how eccentric, how unusual he was. So these feelings of regret, are stirring his mind. Now he could understand the reason behind his teacher Hamel, Monsieur Hamel, being in his Sunday best, his special uniform. What was that special uniform? The uniform of green coat, frilled shirt, and black silk cap, all embroidered. Now he understood. Why was he there in the special dress? He was there in the special dress to honor that last lesson. Now this last lesson has a kind of pun over here. Pun means pun. Pun means when a word is used for two applications. For example, how long a person will live depends on the liver. So liver is has pun over here. Liver means one who lives. If he doesn't want to live, he might, okay. And liver means one one of the highly significant organs there in the body. If liver doesn't function well, if it is you know diseased, you cannot live for long. So liver. Similarly, lesson, the last lesson here, this is last lesson means the last class, and last lesson means the last advice, the last teaching, which the teacher Monsieur Hamel is giving not only to the students but also to the old people over there, so that they could preserve, they could protect, they could guard their own language, their mother tongue, and they could preserve their identity, their culture, their literature. So last lesson. So why was he clad in his special uniform? He was clad in his special uniform to honor the last day. Otherwise, why would he, whatever the occasions when he would put on the special dress of that green coat and other things like a frill shirt and black silk cap? He would put on the green coat, black silk hat, and frill shirt on the days of inspection and prize days. It was not inspection day that day, and it was not the prize day either. So he had put on that special uniform to honor that last lesson. Now, he realizes why the old people had come to the school that day. Why had they come? Because they had come to school to show their sorry feelings. They were very sorry. Why were they sorry? They were very sorry because they hadn't gone to school more. Means it's not like they were illiterate. They were not illiterate, but they were not even highly educated. Why? Because they hadn't attended the school more. That's why, you see old Hauser there in the class with his primer, the elementary grammar book with him. So they were sorry. So they had come to school to express their sorry feelings for not attending the school more. They had come to school to thank their master. Master who? M. Hamel. For his 40 years of faithful service. Just imagine. A person who served in a school for 40 years has suddenly been asked, ordered, commanded to leave the place and go away. How would he have felt? He must have been heartbroken. And third, they had come to school to show their respect for the country, which was not theirs anymore. Why? Because after the annexation of Alsace and Lorraine, they had become the French. They had become German territory. They were no longer the French territories. So once again, let me repeat for you reasons behind the old people sitting in the classroom. Because they were sorry for not attending the school more. That was their way of thanking their master, Monsieur Hamel, for his 40 years faithful service. And they wanted to show their respect towards the country, which was not theirs anymore. Now, the class begins, and it was little Franz's turn to answer participles. So, Monsieur Hamel asks him the question on participle to repeat the rules of participles. He was desperate to, to answer the question. He wanted to recite the rules. But why he couldn't? Because he hadn't prepared. Though he tried, but he got mixed up with the first word only and he couldn't speak another word. He just stood silent. He couldn't even dare to look up because he was so blushed, he was so sorry, he was so embarrassed. So, Monsieur Hamel didn't show any kind of anger. He didn't direct his anger towards Franz or anybody. I mean, actually, he was very sad. He was so, pained to see that people, the former generation and the present generation, none of them had paid their attention to learn their language. That's why he was immensely pained. He didn't scold Franz. He said, it's not your fault only. Everybody has to be blamed. Everybody has to take the share of blame. He says, this is the problem with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. She postpones. She means Alsace, the people of Alsace. People of Alsace, they defer learning. They postpone learning till tomorrow. They never have learnt their things in time. And look where we have come today. Our own language has been snatched away from us. We are being forced to learn a foreign language. So it's a double whammy. I mean, neither they know their own language, and nor do they want to learn the foreign language. Of course, they don't want to learn the foreign language. But the saddest part is that they haven't learned how to read, write their own language properly. And that's what they are very much remorseful about, regretting about. So the teacher, Monsieur Hamel, says that you're not the only one to be blamed for this present situation when you're not able to even simply recite the rules of participles. This is because we all have been, sharing, some blames. We have to share some blames. We all have been somewhere or, at other places responsible for the present situation. He says this is the problem with Elsa. It keeps postponing. She keeps postponing. Mother land is referred to as she. So please remember, she there refers to the people of Alsace. So Alsace keeps postponing, deferring things till tomorrow. And he admonishes people for lack of proficiency in their own language. The makeshift knowledge they do not have very good knowledge. They do not have proficiency over the language. And that's why he says that Germans would mock us, they would ridicule, they would make fun of us. They would say that we pretend to be French. We proudly say that we are French, yet we do not know the French language. They would make fun of us. and that would be really so painful, that would be so excruciating for us, terribly painful. So this is one sub theme the author Alphonse Daudet has touched upon in this story. So that's what the author, is suggesting. We should never postpone learning till tomorrow. Whatever we want to do, we should do today. We should not wait for tomorrow. Today's work should not be put off until tomorrow. So don't think that these are, unprecedented times during COVID-19. Uh, we are at homes, everybody is at home, and you have plenty of time to do all these things. No, when the world again starts, you know, uh, coming back to normalcy, when the world again starts running, you would then be regretting that I had a lot of time to learn so many things in along with my syllabus. So don't allow yourself to be in that position. Learn everything in time, and I'm sure you're doing it. I'm sure you're doing it. So he says everybody has to share the blame. So he blames parents. He blames Franz and students. He says you're not only to blame. You're not only to be blamed for this present situation. He blames parents, saying that parents were not anxious enough to send their children to school for learning, and they preferred sending them to farms and mills so that they could earn a little more money over there. So he blames parents. So why does he blame parents? He blames parents that parents were not anxious enough to send their kids to school for learning. Instead, they sent them to work in farms and mills so that they could earn little more money. It's not like that he is blaming others. He was so candid. He was so honest in his approach. Of course, he was a dedicated teacher. Yet he blames himself for some sporadic, times when he would have given, when he would have not taught or given holidays for some reasons. He says that, haven't I asked you to water my plants, my flowers? Instead of instead of teaching you, instead of allowing you to learn in the class, I asked you to water my plants. Didn't I give you holiday whenever I went fishing? So he is, very candidly blames himself also for the present state of affairs of language there in the town of Alsace. So why does he blame parents? He blames parents because they did not send their children to school for learning. Instead, they send them to mills and farms so that they could earn little more money. He blames himself because whenever he wanted to go fishing, he gave them holiday. He even asked them to water his. He has got a very good garden in front of the school. So many plants which he had planted have become, huge trees now. The hope wind has climbed over the roof. So he is blaming himself also. Then, he, there was an eruption of patriotism in his mind, he at length kept on talking about the French language. He says he describes French language as the most beautiful. He uses superlatives to three superlatives to describe the French language. He says this is the most beautiful language, the clearest one, the most logical language in the world. He advised the people to protect that language among them. He said, whenever any nation is enslaved, and if the people of that nation hold fast to their language, that language acts as a key to the prison. Means they could come out of the chains of slavery if they hold fast to the language, if they have the knowledge of their language. So, language is a potent weapon even to eradicate slavery, even to break the strong chains of slavery. So he says they must guard their language, French language. He at the same time says, okay, they have chained us. They are going to chain our body. They are going to make us their slaves. But they can never make our souls, our mind, our spirits their slaves. Mind is always free. Our spirits are always free. So they had a lesson in grammar, as we have already talked about. He started asking questions on participles. Franz, unfortunately, as he hadn't prepared, he couldn't answer. He just remained standing there in the class with his head hung in shame, embarrassment. Then, when this grammar lesson was going on, Franz found that he was able to understand everything clearly. Unprecedented experience of learning. He had never ever before understood things so easily and nicely, and he himself was so amazed to realize that. Moreover, he was never so attentive in the class. He feels that teacher himself had never explained with so much patience. Then after grammar they had a lesson in writing and history. While this class was going on, some pigeons were sitting on the roof. So Franz thinks to himself, will they be able to make them sing in Germans? Will they make them sing in German? Even the pigeons? So he says these oppressors, these Germans, Prussians, they may force us to learn their language. They may impose their German language on us. But they won't ever be able to impose their language on the animals, birds. So as they are free, birds are free. Similarly, their spirits are also free. Their mind is also free. How far, he's thinking, how far will Germans go in imposing their language? Teaching the pigeons to sing in German specifies how far the Germans would go in their efforts of Linguistic chauvinism. So now, herein this linguistic chauvinism comes. The Germans are practicing that. They are snatching French from the French people and they are imposing their language on them. As we have already talked about, Am Hamel was terribly heartbroken. He was so uh, sad. He was so dejected. He kept on staring at one thing, other thing, all the things in the classroom as if he wanted to fix everything in his mind. Because it now this was his last time to look at his class, to look at the things. Because upstairs his sister was busy uh, packing things. They must leave tomorrow. He was looking at the things as if he wanted to memorize the appearance of everything before leaving. Franz felt that the teacher must be heartbroken to be sent away. This is quite tangible. I mean, you can understand. You can just realize somebody who has been there for the last 40 years is asked to leave the place suddenly. That would have broken him, shattered him. But he remains composed, and despite it was the last lesson, he heard everybody's answers in the class. He heard the lesson from the entire class. Everybody was so despondent. Despondency all around. Hauser was crying, his voice was trembling. So Franz was, full of mixed feelings. He found it humorous to, kind of hilarious to see the old Hauser crying, the way he was crying. He found it humorous. But at the same time, he knew why he was crying. He felt emotional. He felt sad like Hauser. Vive la France. So, when it was 12 o'clock, when the church clock strikes 12, it appeared as if he wanted to continue for the whole day. But he was overpowered by emotions. And when the church clock struck 12, he and that clock sound was followed by the church prayer song, Angelus. He wanted to say something to the class, but he just was choked with emotions. He couldn't utter anything. He was so full of emotions. He could not say even a single thing. He leaned his head against the wall. He actually wrote Vive la France on the board, and then he made a gesture with his hand that the class was dismissed. He was so overpowered by emotions that he could not even utter even a single word about the dismissal of the class. He just made a gesture that the class was dismissed. He was emotionally so distraught, could not say anything. So this is how the last lesson Vive la France. Of course, this is a French expression which means long live France. Actually, in other terms, here this means long live France, but in other on other occasions it may be hooray for France, hooray for France. So when suppose France, the team of France is playing any game of football or anything, the supporters or spectators are saying Vive la France. So they mean over there hooray for France. But here it is long live France, because that is a very this is a different occasion. Everybody is so sad, somber, grave. Vive la France, long live France. With this, he makes a gesture that the class is dismissed. So you can imagine how emotionally shattered a person would be who had been at a place for the last 40 years teaching people and was asked to leave the place suddenly. So this is the end of the chapter, and I'm very sure that you have understood this chapter very nicely. Please read the text once again. I'm advising you to read the text of all the chapters. It's not only the last lesson, all the chapters from Flamingo and Vistas you have to read, because the extract is given in the examination and questions are asked based on the extract. So you would be able to answer those questions based on extracts only when you have read the text. So please do that. So before I say goodbye, let us talk about the assignment. How did Fran's feelings about M. Hamel and school change? What does M. Hamel say about the importance of language to an enslaved people? Why does M. Hamel blame parents of children and himself? Why had the village people come to school that day? How does M. Hamel pay tribute to the French language? How did Franz take the last lesson in grammar, and with what effect? What a thunderclap these words were to me. Which were these words that shocked and surprised little Franz? Describe the last lesson taken by M. Hamel. What was M. Hamel's reaction when Franz could not answer his question in class? And the final question, draw the character sketch of Monsieur Hamel. So there may be, many other questions. There can be many questions on this chapter based on factual description, critical thinking, analysis. You may be even asked some open-ended questions, the questions which require critical thinking, analysis, the questions which do not have one clear answer. But the answer has to be proven. Whatever you are saying, you have to prove that is that way correct. So let me help you, in brief, let me help you drawing the character sketch of M. Hamel. Okay, he was a French teacher. He was passionate about his teaching. He was passionate about his language, French language. He was proud of being French. I'm just giving you some, important points. He was a hard taskmaster, a sensitive man, a true patriot. So such, nouns will and adjectives will help you describe Monsieur Hamel. Similarly, you have to, draw the character sketch of Franz also. So prepare all the questions nicely, and I'm hoping that you're going to do that. I'm sure you have understood the chapter nicely. Thank you. Goodbye. God bless you. God bless us all.